I sat across from Lorraine in our favorite brunch restaurant, the one with the huge windows and the fragrance of fresh coffee constantly lingering in the air. 12 years of marriage. And there she was, slipping divorce papers across the table, like they were a menu special. She had this small smirk on her face, like she'd just won something huge. I didn't anticipate anything. Not the papers, not the smirk, not the way she sat back in her chair, so sure of herself. She'd always been cunning, sure. But this was a new level, even for her. The sunlight caught her golden hair as she sipped her mimosa, acting like nothing was wrong. Next to her sat Carter, her new boyfriend. All muscle and a shiny watch he kept tilting just so everyone could see it. He grinned at me, like he was in on some joke I hadn't figured out yet. The papers sat there between us. Sharp, white, a nice little stack that at the end read my name. I didn't pick them up right away. I simply stared at them. Then at her, trying to figure out when she had turned into this person. 12 years, a life, a house, memories, and she was tossing it all aside like day-old toast left on the counter. I could sense the waitress loitering nearby, undoubtedly wondering why the vibe at our table had gone so frigid. Lorraine didn't care. She just maintained that smirk, waiting, expecting me to react. Maybe she thought I'd yell, plead, create a scene. But I didn't. I wasn't going to give her that. I took a breath. Then, calmly, I asked, "You're really doing this here?" The clatter of plates and silverware filled the silence between us. She shrugged, like it was no big deal. "It's as nice a spot as any." Miles. She hadn't called me that in years. It was always honey or babe, back when things were lighter, but today I was just Miles, like I was some guy she used to know. Carter chuckled, stretching his arm out to grab his coffee, showing off like that made him better than me. I wanted to knock that ridiculous watch right off his wrist, but I didn't move. I just sat there, letting it sink in. The papers already had her signature. Strong, curly. The way she always signed things. She had planned this. Maybe for weeks. Maybe for months. I thought back to the last few years. How she started staying out later. How she stopped asking about my day. How she rolled her eyes whenever I talked about work. I chalked it up to stress. Thought maybe we were just drifting a bit. But this wasn't drifting. This was her jumping ship. And Carter? He was the lifeboat she'd chosen. I wondered what he had that I didn't. Money? Looks? A louder laugh? Whatever it was, she thought it was enough to replace everything we had built. I picked up the pen the waitress had placed with the bill. Lorraine's eyes followed the movement, her smirk widening, like she'd already won. She probably expected me to fight, to drag this out, to give her the nasty, drawn-out divorce she could brag about to her friends. But I wasn't in the mood for games. I signed the receipt for brunch, pancakes, eggs, her mimosa, the whole ridiculous meal. And then I pushed it back across the table. I met her gaze, my voice steady. "See you in court." Her smirk slipped. Just for a second. Just a little crack. But I noticed. Carter squirmed in his seat, like he wasn't sure what to do now that I wasn't playing along. I stood up, dropped some cash on the table, more than enough to cover it, and walked out. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped into the cool air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Lorraine thought she'd caught me off guard. Thought she'd embarrassed me. But she didn't know me as well as she thought. She never had. I had spent years building something bigger than she could ever imagine. And if she wanted to walk away with Carter and his flashy watch, fine. She'd find out soon enough what she was really leaving behind. The street was busy. People strolled past with shopping bags, with dogs on leashes, living their Sunday mornings. I slid my hands into my pockets and started toward my car. The divorce papers? They were still sitting on that table. But in my mind, this wasn't the end of anything. Not for me. This was just the beginning. and by the time they realized that, it would be too late. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, and I started planning. "I told you everything," he swallowed hard, turning to her. "You said you didn't disclose he ran the firm. You simply stated you were married to him." Lorraine's face went white, then red again. "I didn't know he owned it. How was I supposed to—" "Know that?" Her voice cracked. Carter shifted in his seat, gazing at her as if she'd suddenly grown a second head. Judge Calloway didn't flinch. She just kept her eyes on Braden. Thus, she neglected to report a potential conflict, and your firm failed to notice it. "That makes this basic representation rejected due to the omission on the intake form. Mr. Knox's withdrawal stands." She tapped her pen once. Final, like a hammer hitting a nail. Lorraine exploded again, slamming her fists on the table. "I didn't. Lie! I picked your firm since it was the best, not because of them. He twisting this. He cheating." The bailiff took another step forward, but Judge Calloway waved him off, her face firm. "Mrs. Caldwell, control yourself or I'll have you removed." I leaned back in my chair, feeling Jules poke me again, his grin huge now. Elias jotted something, on his notepad, still chilly as ice. Across the aisle, Lon was crumbling apart, and I could see it in her eyes. She was starting to understand. She'd misjudged me. Horribly. She picked Winston and Bry because she assumed it was some gigantic, unbeatable machine that had destroyed me in court. She didn't realize it was mine. Didn't know I'd bought it years ago, back when she was still beaming at me across the dinner table. I'd never warned her, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need to. She'd always laughed at my uninteresting work, never asked about the details. Now those details were biting her back. Braden struggled to recover, standing up again, his voice husky. "Your Honor, this puts my client at a serious disadvantage. We request a continuance to secure new counsel." Judge Calloway didn't even look at him, simply kept writing. "Request noted, but Mrs. Caldwell picked her representation, and she'll live with the repercussions of that choice. Today we proceed with what's on the table." Braden fell back down, defeated. Lorraine turned to me, her voice low and nasty. "You planned this, didn't you? You set me up." I saw her gaze, kept my face blank. "No, Lorraine, you set yourself up." It was the first thing I'd said since the bombshell dropped, and it hit her like a slap. She flinched, then turned away, muttering something to Braden that I couldn't hear. Carter bent over again, whispering. "So what now?" "She's got no lawyer." Lorraine shoved him back, snapping. "Shut up, Carter!" He recoiled, seeming disoriented. And I almost felt awful for him. Almost. The judge went on, bringing Elias up to present my side. He stood smooth and steady, laying out a modest defense. Our marriage had ended. I provided for her. Her charges of mistreatment were exaggerated, no fireworks. Just reality. Lorraine didn't have much to fight back with now, not without Braden, scrambling beside her. I observed her the whole time, saw the panic creeping in, the way her fists twisted together in her lap. She'd walked in here expecting to walk out with half my life in her pocket. Now she was stuck. No lawyer, no strategy, just her and Carter staring at a wall they couldn't scale. As Elias sat down, Judge Calloway stared at Lorraine. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're welcome to represent yourself for the balance of this hearing, or we can adjourn after Mr. Knox's counsel ends. Your call." Lorraine didn't react right away. She simply scowled at me, then at the judge, then back at me. Finally, she murmured, "I need time." The judge nodded. "Very good. Hearing adjourned until tomorrow, 9 a.m. Get your house in shape." She hammered the gavel, and the room inhaled. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. Jules patted me on the back. "That was lovely, man," he said, chuckling quietly. I didn't grin, simply nodded and headed for the door. Lorraine was still sitting there as I passed, her eyes blazing into me. I didn't look back. She'd figure it out soon enough. This wasn't sabotage. It was just me, playing the hand I'd been carrying all along. Outside the courthouse, the corridor was packed, people hurrying past, attorneys barking into phones, clerks carting heaps of files. Yet, it felt like the world had slowed down only for me. Lorraine was back there, scurrying, probably yelling at Braden or Carter or anyone who'd listen. But I didn't care. I'd done what I wanted to do, flipped her whole game upside down, and now she was stranded. No lawyer, no plan, just her own mess staring her in the face. Jules nudged me as we hit the stairs, his voice low and amused. "She's gonna lose it out there, dude. Did you see her face when the judge shut her down?" I nodded, keeping my eyes focused. Yep, she didn't see it coming. Outdoors, the air was crisp, the kind of March chill that wakes you up. I stopped on the courthouse stairs, hands in my pockets, and took a deep breath.